Last year, I was not very high on the Atlanta Falcons heading into the season. I looked at it from a couple of different perspectives. Number one, the team that loses the Super Bowl tends to come back the next year, sometimes and not do as well. Sure, there are those teams that do make the playoffs the next year, but there are also plenty that don't. And then when you also look at the fact that the Falcons gave up that 28-3 lead in the Super Bowl, it's not only that they lost the Super Bowl, it's the way, the matter, the fashion in which they did that made me really wonder how exactly this team was going to ever be able to play at a similar level to 2016. Not just in 2017, but beyond that. Like, you look at the Seahawks, who were the defending Super Bowl champions, and what happened with the Malcolm Butler interception. That organization was never the same. Never. And they still had that core of the team for a couple more years, and they never got back to that point. Which yet, if they would have not thrown the interception, scored a touchdown late, beat the Patriots, they'd have won 2 Super Bowls in a row and might have been perhaps the favorites to go 3 in a row. So it was really, really hard to gauge for me what the Falcons were going to be. So I thought they were going to be a 7-9 team. I thought they played a little bit above themselves in 2016. I thought reality was going to come back to them in 2017. And said, in my opinion, if Dan Quinn got this team to the playoffs, he deserved to be Coach of the Year. Because I didn't see it happening. And now, to be fair to me, they weren't that far away from being a 7-9 top team. When you look at the way they won the Detroit game, you look at the way they won the Chicago game, they really weren't that far away. And it just speaks to how razor thin the margins can be in the NFL from a team, let's say, winning 6 games to winning 10. Really, really thin. But the Atlanta Falcons head coach Dan Quinn earned a tremendous amount of my respect last year based off of what they did. To be able to follow up that season of 2016 with the bitterest of bitter disappointments of what happened in the Super Bowl, to follow that up by coming back the next year, making it to the playoffs, then winning a road playoff game against the Rams, and really sticking a game to the Eagles in Philly in the divisional round, being about 2 or 3 yards away from winning the damn game. The Atlanta Falcons, to me, showed mental toughness that I wasn't sure that they had. They showed heart. They showed purpose, conviction that I wasn't sure was going to be there that go-round. And Dan Quinn, to me, in 2017, more than 2016, truly showed his chops as a head coach, and for my money now is a top 5 guy in the league. You can at me all you want, but it doesn't change the fact. How many other coaches could go into that situation of the Falcons in 2017 and get out of them what he did? It was a tremendous coaching job and much better than the coaching job in 2016. It's one thing to have a good team get hot and play well at the right time and kind of ride the wave and guide them and put them in the right position. It's another thing coming off of a devastating loss to get the team to be remotivated again, to get them on point, to get them on message, and get them to play relatively consistently. Dan Quinn was able to do that. He has my respect. The dude can flat out coach some ball, period. And when you look at the Falcons now, it's interesting to me. With 2016, I was not as high on them as others. Now, heading into 2018, I find myself really high on them because, not 2016, but what they did in 2017. And for the Falcons, this is a team that has a lot of good pieces in place. This is a team that has a solid core. This is a team with stars and impact players and difference makers. You look at this team, there is a lot to like about them. And from the Falcons' standpoint, they even drafted to me this year kind of like a championship contending team would. Like, taking Calvin Ridley in round 1, you could say is a bit of a luxury pick. And it kind of is. But it is an example of perhaps taking best player available on the board. You could still argue it's a position of need now, getting a guy like him out of the slot, and long-term, maybe a long-term replacement for Mohamed Sanu. But that's kind of like big picture thinking of not just sitting there and tying yourself to your truly biggest need, like trying to get another pass rusher or something along those lines, or trying to force yourself to address the right side of the offensive line. It's finding that best talent and drafting that best talent. Isaiah Oliver, round 2. Another guy that I would expect to contribute at some point as a rookie as well. It's kind of like that big picture thinking that you see really good teams do. And the Falcons, don't make any mistake about it, are a really good team. When I look at them going into 2018, to me, there's a lot to like. You got to start off with Matt Ryan and Julio Jones. Now, look, I'm not one that's going to say Matty Ice is elite, but he's definitely a franchise guy. And I do feel like at times he is really badly underrated. I don't know quite why all that is, but it is. Some people, I do think, also overrate him a little bit. But he's a really, really good starting quarterback in this league. And when you look at the Falcons, Matt Ryan has been significantly better for that organization than Michael Vick ever fucking was. You can take that 2002 season and that wild card round victory in Lambeau Field and shove it up your ass. Matt Ryan has been significantly better. Look at the number of playoff appearances, the amount of irrelevant football the Falcons have played during Matty Ice's previous 10 seasons with the team, and it looks like they're going to play more relevant football here in season 11 for him. And then you combine that with Julio Jones, arguably the best wide receiver in the National Football League. That's a great place to start. Then you look at their running game with Devontae Freeman and Tevin Coleman. Maybe at some point in time you'll throw in 2018 draft pick Ito Smith into the backfield mix. But this is a team that has balance on offense. This is a team that can run the ball with some purpose and at least some consistency. And you have two backs that can do a variety of things. A lot of teams would love to have that. Then you look at this team defensively. They got speed all over the place on all three levels of their defense. Their linebacking core specifically is freaky fast. Just can fly all over. But their defensive front has lots of speed and quickness too. Their secondary has decent speed and quickness. At defensive speed, when you hear the old saying, speed kills, at times speed can kill and it can help compensate for mistakes, blown assignments, missed gaps, all of these different things. It can create some trouble at times too with over pursuit and being over aggressive, but speed can kill. And the Falcons on defense have a ton of it. You also look at this as a team that's pretty stable in terms of its foundation. I think something like 15 or 16 draft picks among the 22 starters between offense and defense. That's how championship teams are primarily built, is through the draft. And the Falcons have drafted and developed a lot of their own talent and have them in key places on their team. And when the majority of your team is homegrown, is drafted, and they actually are worthy of being starters, your team's going to be in a pretty good position, which is exactly what the Falcons have been over the past couple of years, and I anticipate them being again this upcoming year. And this is also a team with a lot of playoff and big game experience. Sure, some of that experience might not have paid off very well for them, and some of those big games might have not have turned out the way the Falcons wanted to, but ultimately, the Falcons are familiar with the pressure of big games. They understand how to play in those big games, and they've had times that they've played relatively well in those big games. Not a lot of teams in the league have the amount of playoff and big game experience that the Falcons do. Those are all things going in the favor of the Falcons. When I look at this team, though, for 2018 and what could potentially hold them back from their true potential, I look at two things. Number one is their pass rush. They need Beasley to play more like 2016 Beasley instead of 2017 Beasley. Tack McKinley had an okay rookie season, but they will need more out of him. And I just look at that Falcons team where so much of what they do on defense is built on speed and quickness, but it's also built on being able to get to the quarterback, specifically with the front four. I worry about how consistently they're going to be able to do that. And if they can't do that, that speed will only matter so much on the back end of that defense. They've got to be able to disrupt the timing of opposing quarterbacks, especially within the division that they play, in order to be fully successful as a defense. And then offensively, to me, the question is Steve Sarkisian, the offensive coordinator. I don't know how else to put it. How else do you really put it? You saw how bad his play calling was at times, his game planning was at times in 2017. Now, sure, you could sit there and say guys learn and they make mistakes and they get better from them. But Christ almighty, when you're at the NFL level, you would hope that there is some minimum standard of don't do this crap. And Sarkisian didn't do the best job early on in the year getting Julio Jones involved. I even look at it in general. You could say it's kind of an outlier or a fluke. But Julio had almost 90 catches, 1,400-something yards. I think he only had, 3 receiving touchdowns? That should never, ever, ever happen. That means you're overthinking. That means your game plan sucks. It's called find Julio and get him the damn ball. If Steve Sarkisian's play calling and strategizing and in-game adjustments don't get better, all the talent the Falcons have on both sides of the ball isn't going to matter two hella beans. It just isn't. Now, as we look ahead to the schedule for the Falcons in 2018, I look at the first few weeks of the season, weeks 1 through 3. They start off pretty serious here. They have to go to Philadelphia on Thursday night to officially kick off the regular season. Then they come back the next 2 weeks. They're hosting Carolina. They're hosting New Orleans. That's a stretch of schedule right there if you're the Falcons. You'd love to go 3-0 because if you go 3-0, look the fuck out. The Falcons are coming like gangbusters. But even if you say, hey, we start off 2-1, maybe you lose to the Eagles week 1, or maybe you win. But let's say you lose, but then you're able to, at home, beat Carolina and New Orleans. You could have started off 2-1, 2-0 in your division, and saddling a loss on Carolina and New Orleans, the two teams you envision to be your biggest threats in that division. Seems like a pretty big deal to me. So the Falcons have got to be ready out of the gate early on. But if they're already out of the gate early on, and they play well early on, and they're successful early on, watch out. And then week 5, they go to Pittsburgh. Like, to me, a lot of this season for the Falcons is about to start. And if they start out hot, look out. They might be playing for home field advantage throughout the playoffs. And that's exactly what I expect the Falcons to do this year. I think this is the team that ends up with the number 1 overall seed or number 2 overall seed. Maybe an Eagles or a Rams team perhaps jumps them. This Falcons team is really, really good. And their window to win and win it all is right now. And if they can address some of those shortcomings, though I don't know how much you can address the play calling shortcoming right now, this is a really good team with lots of playoff and big game experience, with marquee star talent, and one of the best head coaches running the show in the league in Dan Quinn. I think the Falcons are at least a 12-win team. They're going to win that NFC South. And to me, they've got to be one of the favorites in the NFC to make it to the Super Bowl.